is now joining.
Who just joined us? Hello, who just came on the phone?
David G. Dave Guckenberger.
Okay. We'd like to know who's on the phone with us. Do you want to be paid for this meeting, Mr. Gutenberger?
No, it won't be very long.
All right, thank you. All right,
Mr. Chairman, I just have a question about, is it an open mic, or do I raise my hand, or how do I?
Every mic is on.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, comments about the resolutions from other counties? All right, any questions on that? All right. Out-of-state travel then, for Human Services and Health, to Duluth, Minnesota, March 12th, 2021, social worker visit, juvenile and placement. Go ahead, Becky.
So this travel request is not unlike any other travel request that I've had for this purpose. According to state Wisconsin guidelines, we are supposed to see children in out-of-home placements quarterly. This child is in Duluth, Minnesota. We had not had out-of-state travel due to the pandemic, but this facility is requesting a social worker attend to staffing, and so that's why I'm bringing this forth today.
Questions? Yeah.
Question I have is, you mentioned the term guidelines, under the guidelines, okay? Is it mandatory, or can you explain to me how this works? And I know you said it's not unlike other requests you brought up of this nature, but I've never really participated in the issues you're talking about, so you can
Sure.
explain them to me, please?
Sure. So the state of Wisconsin provides guidance, as I've said, for child welfare work that we do. We have a manual that we're supposed to follow. If we don't follow it, they keep track of things that we do not comply with. The standards are really best practice, and so we do get spoken to about not following the guidance.
Okay, I guess the other explanation is, how does this, or what's this for? What's the background?
Sure. So
What's it cost, frankly?
Okay, so the cost is going to be mileage to Duluth, Minnesota. There is not going to be an overnight or anything like that. It's just simply traveling by car to Duluth, Minnesota. The expectation for that quarterly visit is to get information in regards to how the child is doing, if there's any behaviors, what's the current treatment plan look like, what does the discharge plan look like, how are things going at that facility.
Another question I have is, would we be better off to give the individual a vehicle to take, a county-owned vehicle, as opposed to paying 55 cents a mile or whatever it is? Instead of paying the mileage, we're going to pay them their salary or stipend or hourly wage anyhow, right? And we own a bunch of vehicles, a lot of them sit around, and would we be better served to just allow them to use a county-owned and maintained and insured vehicle?
We have done that in the past, just for your awareness. We have done that in the past. This particular request is for a Friday, and so if that's what the committee decides that they want to do, have the social worker travel with one of the vans through the ADRC, that would be fine. We have done that before in the past. It would also depend upon whether or not we can meet the needs of other residents of Dodge County because we do have a lot more transportation requests for Dodge County residents to medical appointments. So I'm uncertain if there is a van available on that day.
Any other comments or questions?
I would move to approve.
Okay, a motion to approve. Second by Roland. Any other questions? Not?
I would offer an amendment. I would approve it with the understanding they use a county-owned vehicle for the transportation.
What if we don't have a vehicle available?
With that,
What if we don't have a vehicle available?
there's a lot of other departments with a lot of vehicles, a lot of vehicles.
If I may, I know that there have been times in the past where I have asked the sheriff's department, for example, to request a vehicle, and they're using that for their own personal or personnel requests. And so I can ask, but I don't know that I would be able to get a vehicle from any other fleet either.
Jeff?
Okay, so this begs the question, there's a couple of things going on here in my mind, and I might as well share them with you. So recently, I observed the Health and Human Services vehicle sold on a Wisconsin surplus online auction. And if you've read the condition of the vehicle when it was sold, we got $925 for a microbus, okay, that essentially succumbed to neglect. The condition report was that the entire vehicle rotted out from the bottom up, okay? Suspension components and brake lines and gas lines and all kinds of stuff just rotted out from neglect because primarily it wasn't washed, okay? Now, they're expensive vehicles to buy and to maintain, you know, in a fleet. I understand that. But at the end of the day, when we own a truck wash in every single highway shop, why in the heck aren't these little buses being washed, okay? So it becomes, to me, a question of who owns the assets? Who owns the truck wash? Who owns the van? Who owns the vehicles, okay? Not individual department heads, the taxpayers own them, and we need to take better care of them, and we shouldn't be purchasing underutilized assets. Why should we pay 55 cents a mile to and from, where is this? Duluth, Minnesota, when we own the equipment, and we insure it, and we maintain it? That's my beef here.
I think the question's been asked and answered regarding the vehicle availability, and Director Bell has indicated if a vehicle is available, it'll be utilized. So I think that's been asked and answered.
I guess I would move to amend that it be required to use a county vehicle.
Well, I have a motion on the floor, so if they want to amend it, it's up to them.
Okay? I know we went through an amendment process last month over, you know, a resolution being submitted by individual supervisors, and we had no business touching it, and I think it comes up later on the agenda in this meeting, so, I don't know.
Well, we got this amendment on the motion on the floor, so either we vote it down or up. What do you want to do? I'm going to call the vote. All those in favor of allowing this to go, as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against?
Nay.
So it passes. That's it.
On this topic, Mr. Chairman,
Got to speak up.
on this topic, Mr. Chairman, for future items, can we add the use of county vehicles for out-of-state travel to a future agenda so that if it is going to be a policy, it would be a county-wide policy rather than come up with one event?
You can do that. All right. County clerk. You have our agenda. Go ahead, Karen.
Sorry, I'm here. In your packet was the spreadsheet of agenda items for the March 16th meeting. In addition to those on the spreadsheet, there is a radio dispatch console resolution coming out of the Judicial and Public Protection Committee meeting on the 5th, and a resolution, condolence resolution for Mary Ann Miller. And the chairman will be asking for confirmation of the appointment of a new county board member, and also her appointment to 4 different committees.
Questions on the agenda?
I have a question. There is a resolution from David Buchenberger and myself that isn't on the agenda.
Oh, you're right. That's my mistake.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question. When are things due to your office to be put on the March 16th meeting?
Let me read the rule. Rule number 5, on page 23 of the directory, except in emergency situations, at least 7 days prior to each county board meeting, the chairman or vice chairman of each committee of the county board shall file with the county clerk all resolutions and ordinances to be brought before the county board by the respective committee. This rule shall also apply to any other business the committee or individual supervisor wishes to bring before the board at any meeting. That being said, if I know there's something coming out of a committee and the committee meets Wednesday morning, which we don't like to have, but if they do, we don't mail out the packet on Tuesday knowing that there's something coming out of Wednesday, the next day's meeting.
So does the same policy apply to an individual supervisor wishing to bring something in the county board agenda?
I would say we want to follow the 7-day rule
Okay, thank you.
at that point. If you know you're going to bring something, you should communicate with me, and so I can communicate with the chairman to make sure he wants this on the agenda.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anything else? I got somebody at the window.
Good.
Thank you.
County administrator update.
Just real brief, in the packet, and there was also a separate mailing regarding the initial proposed 21-23 state of Wisconsin budget. There's a summary of some different items impacting counties. We certainly recognize the budget process has a long ways to go, and I've also asked the respective department director, so as the process moves forward, I'll keep the executive committee informed, but the process has begun to look at other proposals for the July 1 renewal. Any questions?
Are we going to see essentially a spreadsheet or an estimate or indication of what we could save with different deductible options and things of that nature? I know that last year we met in the back corner about how some of the vehicles are basically insured for replacement value and whatever else, and are we going to be provided with a list of vehicles that maybe we shouldn't insure for that value?
Whatever you'd like to
I
receive,
guess-
we'll provide.
I guess what I'm saying is, you know, are the county, is this committee or the fiscal hawks for the taxpayers going to have an opportunity to dissect the information? Because I know you talk about discussion about insurance renewal, but we're pretty much uninvolved at this point.
Well, as the county's risk manager, I take it as my responsibility to coordinate the renewals and provide those functions throughout the year. And one of those functions is the renewal and keeping the executive committee informed on the status of such. And the intent is, and what I'm hopeful for, is that we provide a variety of deductibles and look at the impact and be able to make a decision based on some hard data.
And we'll get to see that information.
You will before any decision is made, correct?
Okay, thank you.
this mic's on. Okay. Contract reviews. Under Human Services, the department entered into an agreement with DocuSign. That agreement was signed. Again, under Human Services, there's an agreement under the state statute 8521 for transportation. It's a grant agreement that was signed. The 2021 ADRC grant agreement was signed. And there is an agreement with a presenter. It's a speaking engagement for a caregiver event. That agreement was signed. Under the category of sheriff, the sheriff's office has an agreement with Baycom for tech support services, and that agreement was reviewed, redrafted, and signed. Under physical facilities, we've got a couple of agreements that were reviewed, revised, and signed for Johnson Controls. One of them is the now countywide planned services agreement. The physical facilities in Clearview work together, and now all of the buildings are going to be covered under a planned service agreement for Johnson Controls. That's mainly for the major assets like HVAC and large systems. That agreement was reviewed and signed. In addition, there's an agreement with Johnson Controls for preventive maintenance for fire alarms, kitchen hoods in the jail and such, and that was reviewed and signed. And then lastly, under the category of Clearview, the Health Pro Therapy Services Agreement and Business Associate Agreement was reviewed and signed. The BAA was signed either Friday or sometime over the weekend, so that agreement is done in full now. And that's all I have on that. Under the category of carry forwards, I looked at the budget for codification. That's kind of a joint project that I work with the county clerk's office on, and we budget every year. I budget every year in my budget $3,000 for codification. I'm asking that the balance that is in the 2020 account be carried forward. We did budget for 2021 $3,000, but I'm asking to carry forward whatever that balance is in 2020, because I believe that for the 2021 codification, and I don't know if Karen's still on the line, but you know that you approved changes to, for instance, Chapter 5, 5.08. You will be having rule changes, which then affect Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, mainly Chapter 1 of the code. So I do expect that the codification process in 2021 is going to be a larger document, if you will, to incorporate all of the changes, the ordinance changes that the county board has done over the course of the last year. And I will just point out, in the past, we're usually within the $3,000, but in the past, when we had years where you had a lot of speed zone changes that we incorporated into the ordinance, or when we had ATV trail routes, now we don't put them in the ordinance anymore, but when there's a number of routes or segments that are incorporated into the ordinance, the codification process gets to be bigger, if you will. And the actual document that is produced by Unicode is essentially we're charged almost on a per page basis. So when you have more ordinances, the cost is up. So that's a long explanation about the request to push forward or carry forward the balance that's in that account, and I believe it's about $5,000.
Do we need a motion to carry forward?
A motion to authorize or approve that would be appreciated.
A motion by Mr. Schaefer, a second by Mr. Marcy. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Ayes have it. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
All right, resolution to terminate Dodge County emergency declaration of public health COVID-19. Comments, questions on that?
I've got a question. We've been talking about this process and what we should do with this declaration for a long time. I know that the majority party down in Madison sort of went and did their thing, but when the state legislature did their thing, there was 50 health organizations or organizations over 50 that put on record that they were against canceling this declaration until a later date. You know, those were organizations such as the Wisconsin Medical College, Children's Family Physicians, Wisconsin Hospital Associations, Medical Society, Leading Age, Wisconsin Council of Teachers, our churches even. So I'm a little leery of looking at doing something at a county level by taking that declaration away. Because I looking at what these other organizations that are opposing this are saying, and I think that weighs a little bit more for credibility on our end, that we should probably maintain the emergency declaration at least for a period of time yet.
Other comments?
Personally, I think we're talking about a couple of different things here. I don't know if, you know, our own county board policy is wrapped up in this termination of this emergency declaration or not. One thing that is not specific on the agenda is whether or not it applies to attendance to vote at meetings, or how we vote at meetings, which is kind of a separate issue. I mean, if we're going to leave the emergency declaration in place, I don't know what purpose it serves. We've never seen cause to implement it. We're just kind of cruising along the way we always do. But this non-attendance, especially at county board meetings themselves, I think corrupts the vote and corrupts the process here. So, I don't know, can somebody add if that's incorporated in this argument, or how we rectify that?
Comment, Dave?
On the back page, it restricts the right to vote or receive a per diem for attendance.
For me, my opinion is that I don't have problems going back to a previous rule maybe on attendance at board meetings. I have no issues on that, but the declaration itself, I don't think is hurting anything else as far as health policies in the county, and it should stay in place until I think we can have the health organizations that really are fighting this thing comment a little bit more favorably. Well, I'd be willing to see us maybe amending or see us splitting that issue that Jeff was mentioning about attendance at county board meetings and being able to vote out of this here resolution. Or with this resolution having that there, but not the emergency declaration rescinded.
Other comments?
I guess I believe that we need to accommodate some board members who have concerns about attending in person. I do think that it's reasonable not to pay a per diem if they choose to attend virtually. And I think that is a reasonable compromise to
to that issue, which is incorporated into this, but actually a separate issue, I think.
Joey, got a comment?
Well, I have a question for Dave. So would you say don't pay per diem and don't let them vote also?
No, I think they should be allowed to vote.
Allowed to vote, okay.
Allowed to vote, but not get a per diem.
The other question I had was something Supervisor Schmidt said, that the emergency declaration didn't help anything. And I guess maybe Amy or Kim could discuss that. Did we gain anything by having the emergency declaration?
That's what we gained.
Correct. We do gain reimbursement. And we gain the ability to use CARES. And now that CARES is over, we gain the ability to use FEMA funding at 100% if that's a thing. And we gain the ability to request resources to augment our local resources to give tests twice a week. We're using the Guard yet for that. To hire staffing and help and or get volunteers and all those things for giving vaccinations. How many times a week? I don't even know. That's at least 3 times a week. So we still are utilizing pieces of it, yes.
But do we need a county-specific emergency declaration for that assistance, or does that fall under the governor's emergency order?
It does fall under the governor's and the federal. However, in with what Mr. Hilbert is saying, you have to also think about the message you're sending to your public with a declaration. Because we are we're following how we're supposed to follow emergencies. Everybody talks about emergencies. In Wisconsin, it works from the local to the state to the federal. We're still following the procedures. That's how it works.
Actually, I would say it was the opposite.
Well, I don't disagree
It
with you.
went from the federal to the state to the local. That's how we adopted the emergency order, okay? And I would argue that at least 50% of our population in Dodge County would say, get rid of the order. Let the state and the feds handle it. Why are we pretending that we're doing something here?
But the
It's
state and
special
feds aren't
because we're
handling
not.
it. We're doing things at the local level. We still have to handle it at the local level. It's still public health and our locals that are doing these things every day in support of COVID. It's not, the state is sending vaccines, the state is sending Guard members for testing, but they're not doing all of it. That's not how it works. Locally, we're doing these things.
And those things would not be available if we did not have the declaration?
They would still be available if we request them, but it's still reinforcing the fact that this is how it works. It works that you should have a local emergency if you're using those avenues. That's how it's worked in everything else. And we don't know what is going to happen in the next couple months. By May, if we have the vaccine and you know, whatever percent of our population is vaccinated and we're getting those wordings, that's another thing. But right now, we're just starting March.
Amy, let me ask another question from a different way. Is this declaration hurting anything for us in the local level?
I do believe that for the emergency, no. I believe that you are having this discussion every month because of how it affects how the board meets and votes. I do believe that that's what, you know, why it stays on the agenda.
I would like to get back to the other paragraph on the second page regarding the attendance and the right to vote and per diem and all of that business, okay? So here's my issue. I believe that if you're not here present at the meeting, you cannot take in the discussion. You cannot participate in what is essentially a public hearing, okay? So we have a question in front of our town attorney today, and I believe it isn't gonna work out. Our Board of Appeals needs to meet next Wednesday night to hear a variance, okay? So one of the members, prominent person in the community, right, is is gonna be going to a conference in Madison. So he wants to attend a public hearing virtually, okay? I don't believe he can do that. The attorney's gonna weigh in on the deal, but how do we handle public hearings in Dodge County with this deal? I think you have to be there by personal attendance. Is my personal opinion. You can't possibly take in the content of the meeting if you are not there. I don't care what anyone says. And you can't rely on these electronic devices to 100% accurately reflect what goes on. I mean, they're not reliable. You don't necessarily hear everything that occurs. I've attempted to attend drainage board meetings and county committee meetings virtually, and it's next to impossible. Our systems just aren't there where you're going to hear you don't hear every word, and you don't observe every element of the conversation, including body language and whatever else. Okay, so my opinion is no vote if you don't attend. You can attend, you know, observe, whatever. I don't even care if you comment. But as long as your comment doesn't convey your vote, right? And corrupt the deal again. But I just believe we gotta get to the end of that thing. So.
To respond to Supervisor Hilbert's question regarding what does it get us, or what doesn't it get us, or does it harm anything, there are non-monetary effects of keeping the declaration in place. It authorizes the county board chair to exercise certain powers, which he has done in the past, and I can give you examples, and the chair of the Human Resources Committee will know about this. When we put into place the COVID plan for Dodge County, there was a need to, over time, define things like healthcare provider and essential worker. And when the Department of Labor finally issued its guidance on those topics, the county needed to act quickly, and we did that, and there were at least 2 occasions where the county board chair, again, this is non-monetary, but the county board chair had to issue what I deemed or termed a proclamation, and I prepared it, to make those definitions. So as federal rules and federal laws change, it is good to have the declaration in place so that as a county board, you're authorizing the county board chair to exercise some extraordinary powers and duties. Now, I know that you amended this declaration because you were concerned about, you meaning the executive committee, I don't need to personalize it, but the executive committee was concerned about the issue of purchasing and purchases and following standard procedures. So that was an amendment to the declaration, and that is one of the things that the departments now need to do, is follow standard procurement requirements for acquisition of supplies and goods and such. So that's one thing that I wanted to mention in response to Supervisor Hilbert. The other thing I will point out is that back in March of 2020, you did tie the declaration to your rule, and that the rule is Rule 3. And if you want to change Rule 3, I would suggest to you, and you want to unhitch Rule 3 from this declaration, then I would suggest that you may want to take up Rule 3 and look at it closely, because many supervisors have expressed concerns with regard to this voting and how you vote on the county board floor and such. And now today, hearing the issue of whether or not you should actually be paid a per diem if you're going to appear remotely. So I would suggest that you may want to put Rule 3 on your agenda if you don't terminate this declaration at your March 16th meeting. And then there was another point I was going to make, but I've forgotten, so I apologize.
Kara?
Actually, I was wanting to respond to a couple of things. First, I would say I think there's too much emphasis being put on voting and attendance to meetings by county board members with regard to this declaration of emergency. I think that's, I appreciate you bringing up that was got tied to this declaration. My original question was to find out if the other counties that have rescinded their declarations of emergency are having trouble getting access to any of the services that were discussed by our emergency management director. Are they not testing? Are they not getting vaccines? Or are they having trouble accessing any of PPE or any of the other services that continue to get to circulate the reason why we have this declaration to begin with? I'm not interested in having a declaration of emergency to send a message. I think policies should be evidence-driven. You know, you make laws with a purpose. You have SMART goals, and I don't know that this is serving that anymore after a full year of being in a state of emergency. So unless we can define what, unless we're able to define some specific things that we are gaining in Dodge County by maintaining this emergency, then I will support ending the emergency declaration.
Russ?
Go ahead.
I've got some experience now of being able, I've done the phone call-in type thing for committee meetings, and now I've been doing these video things, and one meeting with the health facilities thing was 4 hours, and I had no problem being on the video part and keeping it. I had electricity, of course, that day, but I think this video meeting type application works very good at being able to hear people, and especially out of this boardroom. It's been real easy to hear everyone, and the clarity on the screen is excellent, and I don't see a drawback for people to be able to comment or do things like that. As far as the issue of per diems and being paid for things like that, that don't interest me one way or the other. I don't care, but I would believe that it would be still beneficial that we spent this money on the video part and being able to use it and the quality on it. I think we should allow members, maybe not for board meetings or whatever, but access to be able to use this and participate in, especially committee meetings. And I would agree with Kim that maybe unhitching Rule 33 from this resolution or this emergency declaration might be the two issues that I'd see being going forward. You know, one on the emergency declaration and the other one tying it to Rule 3.
Any other questions or comments?
Would you entertain a motion to move this forward to the county board?
Well, we're going to have discussion at the county board anyway. We can't, I think it'll be talked about quite lengthy at the board meeting, as long as that is not passed and I have an opportunity to comment.
I would move this along to the March county board meeting.
Is there a second to it?
I'll second.
Okay. Yep.
So the document that was in the packet is a draft, and I can modify it and bring a blue jacket version, but I would like you to look at page 2, the paragraph starting on line 8. That, when I first did a draft of this, I included that provision in there, that all committee meetings will continue to be held in the auditorium so that we can social distance and such. So I guess I would just ask for, as a part of the motion to move it forward, could you please indicate what you want done with that paragraph?
My personal opinion is to leave it intact, because the social distancing requirement is actually in compliance with the governor's order, right? Am I reading this correctly? I mean, this has nothing to do with our own policy or emergency order. This is actually, I mean, that paragraph is in response to what the governor.
Well, I think it is your own policy. It's your resolution. It's the county's resolution. So it's your policy. You're saying there that the committee meetings shall continue to be held there and providing reasonable access for the public. I guess what I'm looking for is you want that to just be indefinite, just make it a statement instead of a effective until such date?
Well, I think we would be better off to make that a recommendation rather than a resolve clause, because otherwise we gotta revisit it if we ever change, and I think a recommendation to do it, and then committee chairs could move to a different location if their committee and social distancing and safety protocols all would allow that. So I think it's more of a recommendation than a hard and fast rule that all committee meetings be held down there.
I look at it similar to a compliance with an ADA requirement, okay? Someone's visually impaired or deaf or whatever, right? You have to make reasonable accommodations for them to attend a meeting. That's really what this does, right? It says where we're gonna meet, okay, and that we're gonna make these accommodations and accommodate social distancing and disinfecting, which is in compliance with the governor's order. Isn't that really what it says?
I believe what it says, what this says, if this was passed, this meeting is illegal because it's not in those rooms. So I think it needs to be a recommendation.
I would agree with Dave, only because I've been on some committees where we never met in the admin building at all. We would always be at Clearview for health facilities. I'm sure there's probably other committees that meet elsewhere in the past. So this declaration, if that goes, the way I read this, is that the declaration is defeated or is removed. There is no more rules to be able to have to use the auditorium, and that we could go anywhere, like we had in the past. That's the way it was.
Well, can we just add the term or as otherwise provided after auditorium?
I think we gotta add something, because right now it's recommending the H and R up in the auditorium, room H and I for the auditorium. Right now it's specifying that. So it's gotta be recommended that we can make a decision on where to have the meeting.
Well,
How about adding something like, unless otherwise determined by the committee chair?
here's the deal. So we talk about illegal meetings. I remember going to highway shops, the committee meetings during this emergency order. So technically, were they illegal meetings according to this emergency declaration that we had, self-imposed? Okay, so I think you just add, or after administration building, put or as otherwise provided for. I don't, something like that. Because I know the highway committee met at a couple of highway shops during that time period, so.
But isn't the resolution or the motion going to be for eliminating this document? So then why are we talking about where the committee meetings are going to be held? If that's actually the way we're going to take it to the county board, and they follow a recommendation on that, this isn't in that declaration. There is no declaration.
This resolution states that the meetings shall continue to be in rooms H and I. So I think it's very specific that we have to meet in rooms H and I, the way it's worded now.
So the resolution resolved clauses are the action items. And what you would be resolving is, one, terminate the declaration, two, to effective upon the adoption of the resolution, to essentially not allow supervisors to vote or receive a per diem for virtual attendance. And then the third item would be that committee meetings need to occur in the auditorium. So by adoption of this resolution, you don't, it doesn't make all those action items null and void. Those are three separate action items.
I got you.
I guess I would, the executive committee just needs to tell me what you want in there.
I have another question. Okay, so I don't know what the emergency order actually says, but this specifically talks about county board committee meetings, okay? Doesn't talk about other boards and commissions. So in reality, could you consider the highway committee, the highway commission? I don't know. But I will tell you this, even the drainage board, which is a quasi-independent entity, okay, still, I think, falls under the county's jurisdiction to some degree, right? We've met all over the place for assessment hearings, at town halls, and things of that nature during this entire time period. Okay, we did practice social distancing. The town halls or wherever we meet, you know, generally provide the hand sanitizer and all that business. And we, you know, but in reality, we probably didn't 100% comply with the emergency order. I know what the intent was, but my opinion is we just need to make accommodations for the public at these meetings, wherever the heck they're held, okay? I don't care where they're at. Notice them properly and whatever, according to the open meetings law. Practice the social distancing and disinfecting and all the things of that nature. And during county board meetings, I don't mind if the public is in room H and I in the auditorium for now, so that we can comply with the social distancing. I don't have a problem with any of that, because that's all in compliance basically with the governor's orders. So.
As well as the county health officer's recommendations. She has made those recommendations to social distance, and we certainly will comply with the open meeting law and make sure that the public has reasonable access to meetings.
Jim, you have a comment?
Yes, in my hand is Resolution 1977 that was adopted last March, 27-0. The resolution does not contain any language requiring that any committee meetings be held in H&I. So that's a moot point. Now, that was a practice adopted initially to accommodate social distancing, and also realizing that it wasn't practical for health facilities to meet at Clearview any longer because of the restrictions. So it was internally decided to accommodate the public safety and the social distancing to switch those locations to H&I, but it was not required as part of the emergency declaration resolution.
So maybe you just want to take that whole thing out.
Right. Okay. And Kim brings up a valid point that it's the local public health recommendation as well to continue the social distancing, and that's best accommodated in H&I than at some of these other locations, which still have restrictions as far as public access or limitations.
All right, so Kim, you're gonna take that out?
And I would, yes, I'll take off draft and bring a version down here if you approve this going forward. It will have it has language on here about a fiscal note. The finance committee will need to talk about it on Monday. So you may see some handwritten something in your packet, I guess. It doesn't have a
county board supervisors, David Whitberg and Kara Sheehan going.
Are you, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you gonna take a vote on the resolution, or do you wanna bring it back?
I want to see it first,
Okay.
so we can see what we got.
Is this resolution just for employees of Dodge County, or is it affecting board members as well?
Kara?
I didn't realize you were talking to me. So it was the employees. It was specifically written to have our policies be consistent. If we're in a state of emergency and it's too dangerous to come to work, it's probably too dangerous to get on a plane or on a bus or on a train for work. Is Dave Guckenberger still here? I don't know why this is even at the executive committee.
Yes, I am.
David, would you like to speak on this at all?
Well, just briefly, I mean, the minutes from last meeting for the exec committee had already advanced this to the county board meeting. So I'm listening in today to question, number one, why we're discussing it again, and then number two, why exec committee feels that they have any authority over this resolution to begin with. And maybe Kim can speak to that authority of the exec committee, unless she stepped out.
Kim left the room to get the copy of the other motion.
I will say that the resolution on my desk still contains spelling errors. One where Dodge County is spelled Dogue County. One is resolved instead of resolved, and my name is spelled incorrectly. So those would have to be fixed.
This is the way it came from Mr. Guckenberger.
But it was amended, subsequently amended
Right.
by the executive committee.
So, and on that, I'm not sure that we had any, we didn't really have the ability to amend that, even though I agreed. We really shouldn't have done that. It should have been done on the floor. Any amendments to that resolution should have been done on the board floor. So, may I ask why it is back on the agenda? I didn't know why it was back on the agenda. When I was asked, I couldn't answer.
It was just brought back because of the fact of the questions that were coming from it. So we can send it to the county board or whatever. What do you want to do with it? It was amended because it was turned, I believe Kim would tell you that it was turned over to the committee and to go from there, so.
Mr. Guckenberger, do you have any position on this? Otherwise, I would ask that the amendment be removed and left as original.
I'll just ask who turned it over to the committee. And by what authority?
You have to wait till Kim comes back, because there was a rule.
Okay.
You know, there's been some discussion on the amendment. Supervisor Schmidt talked earlier that we did something before, and we weren't doing it, we did an amendment. But this amendment was put in before there was a motion on this resolution. The one you talked about was after there was already a motion. So that's where the difference is. I don't know that, I mean, this was all voted on. So I don't know if you can remove an amendment after it's already been voted on and passed on.
Okay, here is what I think the argument is, and in retrospect, I would not have voted for the amendment. And then I never would have voted to forward it to the county board as amended. Okay, I think what occurred was the individuals who drafted this or signed it presented it to the executive committee for information purposes only. Then what happened was the committee, a member of just 7 people, basically, we took it upon ourselves to amend their resolution. I don't think that was for us to do. I think, you know, by county board rule, any individual supervisor can present for consideration by the county board a resolution, right? So out of respect for that, we should have been a little more cognizant of what we were doing, right? And if an amendment was to be made, it should be made at the county board level for a couple of reasons. One is simple math, okay? So now the resolution is amended, presumably, and the county board, or the executive committee is going to, I think, submit an amended resolution, right? Which basically corrupts what their idea was, right? So a simple majority of 7 is 4 to make a decision, whereas a simple majority of 33, 17 requires a lot more a different threshold, if you may, to approve an amendment. And then after that, then you vote on the resolution as amended. So to me, I think we made a mistake. And I'll admit, I errantly voted for both sending it to the county board and amending someone else's idea and concern.
But in light of that, then we shouldn't have had it before us to vote on it.
I think it was submitted out of respect to the, you know what I'm saying, in advance of submitting it to the county board. I think that's what occurred.
But if it came to us for a vote, then we should have a right to amend it.
I don't think it came for a vote. I think it was just, here's what we're up to, okay? And we're gonna submit this to the clerk and hopefully have it on the agenda and we'll talk about it then.
Can I say something, please? Dave Lukenberger? So, I spent many years on the finance committee meeting where multiple resolutions came to our committee, and we were not allowed to amend the resolutions. Any amendments that we wanted to make had to be done on the board floor. So, I'm not sure by what authority the exec committee can amend this resolution. I mean, they did at their last meeting, but the resolution was presented under our board rules to the clerk to be placed on a future county board agenda. Now, I understand the board rules allow Russell or the chairman to take it and send it to committee for review. I don't know that he did that. Maybe he did, and maybe that's how exec committee ended up with this thing. But if we're going to allow committees to amend the resolution, then much like Jeff Schmidt said, you got small minority that can make adjustments to resolutions. For example, IT, there's only 5 people on that committee. So are we saying now that a resolution can come to IT and then we could amend that? Then a small majority, 3 people, can put something into a resolution and it's going to take 17 to take it back out. That's what's wrong with the matter. I'm just going to repeat. I don't know why this thing ended up at exec, and I don't know why they felt that they could amend it short of just presenting it on the board floor.
My question is, Joe Marcick, Mr. Supervisor Gutenberg. Then what
Sure.
would happen if the committee declined to forward it? Let's say they voted no then.
They don't have the authority to decline. Our board rules state that I can put a resolution together and give it to the clerk to have it placed on the agenda. Okay? That's happened in the past. All right? Where we've had single members put a resolution together and put it on board agenda. Matter of fact, in 1977, you know, the one that we're talking about here is prior to this. That signed by a single board member and placed on the agenda.
And I agree with that, but the question is, then why does it come in front of a committee for approval or disapproval? Then it shouldn't be coming in front of the committee for any vote.
Well, that's a good question. You have to ask whoever put it in front of you as to why they put it there. I don't know why it was there. I sent it to the clerk and I sent it to Kim, okay? And I asked Kim to edit it. I gave her a week to do that, okay? And, you know, if there's typos, I apologize, you know? I will be very careful on any future things that they do to make sure that there's no typos. And all future resolutions, trust me, will be verified deeply for typos, if that's how we're going to evaluate resolutions in the future. However, I don't know, again, why we're not following our own board rules for this resolution and everything else. You have to explain it. You have to ask questions by whoever decided to do this.
To clarify, Supervisor Marsick, neither David Guggenberger nor Kirishi and Malloy spelled with EA brought that to the executive committee. It was not forwarded to you by either of the authors of that resolution. Okay?
So is there any reason that Supervisor Gutenberger could just present as the amendment as he submitted to the county board without
In his
having went
resolution?
through?
The resolution itself?
Yeah.
There's no reason it wouldn't go straight to the board.
Right, I'm saying, so for the next board meeting, he could submit his original resolution without the amendment on it.
Right.
And there's no reason that couldn't happen, right?
Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that Supervisor Guggenberger is very much correct on this. I think the resolution that was in our packet is the original, not as amended. And my question is...
They're both in there, Dave.
Okay. The question I have for the two authors are you asking us to approve it and send it, or are you just bringing it, is it just here for information now, and if we do nothing, it can be on the county board agenda?
We didn't.
You're asking me?
Back here.
Yes, Dave.
I never went through in the first place.
Okay.
I don't know why it's before you.
And I appreciate the thought of at least providing a heads up. I think that's a great idea, and I appreciate that. But I believe that you can request it to go to the county board and without us, and I think that's really the way it needs to be done.
Let's just step back. He brought this resolution in before, less than 7 days before the county board. That's why it didn't get on in January, because it wasn't that pressing to amend the agendas that were already out. That's why we did it. So then it was floating around out there. So we did bring it to exec. Maybe we shouldn't have, but you got, you know, every resolution, whether it comes from one person or not, should be reviewed by some county board committee. That's why we have a committee form of government. But if the committee don't want to touch it, then we can go direct to the county board. And I guess that's maybe the way it should have went, but it didn't. It went to executive. Because apparently, you know, we don't want to let anybody travel, so eventually at all. So I guess that's the answer. Mr. Schmidt.
Okay, I think the way you could treat this is it was submitted and presented to the executive committee, much like resolutions from other counties. Okay? This is like resolution from other county board members, right? Where we could talk about the issues within the deal, but not really make a decision or corrupt the document, right? We could discuss it, maybe some other ideas come up, maybe the generator of the resolution would have altered its form a little bit or something of that nature, right? And in my opinion, that's the way you could look at this thing. So in retrospect, I think the best thing to do would be to either not present the amended resolution and allow the individuals to present their own, or to rescind the amendment, which effectively does the same thing, and forward it to the county board, by the committee. Or again, we just allow the individuals who signed the resolution to present it on their own. And if someone wants to amend it on the county board floor, go ahead, then we can all talk about it and meet the vote threshold to amend it. That's the way I see it. I will point out also, okay, so even though it may have been presented, only 6 days before the county board meeting, or 5, or whatever it is, and not put on the agenda, which is okay. I'm okay with that. We need to abide by the rule, unless, of course, it's important or an emergency or whatever, then the county board chair can use some discretion, and he has, okay? The county board chair also has authority to refer a resolution to a specific committee. And he has some other powers that could occur during the county board meeting. So for us to, take it upon ourselves to alter the deal, I just think is not the correct way to look at it.
I tend to agree with Supervisor Schmidt on this, and I believe that probably our best thing is to do nothing at this level and allow it to go to the county board meeting. It's obviously plenty early now for the March meeting, and we go forward.
So you want to take the amendment out, or you just want to send it as amended?
I think it needs to go without the amendment, the original resolution as sent in by Supervisors Kuchenberger and Malloy, and if it decides to be amended on the county board floor, fine.
The consensus of everyone?
Yep. I agree with Dave.
Mr. Chairman, it's Karen.
Yes, Karen?
Is Kim in the room?
Yes?
So I don't know if you need a motion to rescind the amendment, a reconsideration?
It's probably a rescind motion, but rather than just going through all the parliamentary gymnastics, I think it would be proper for the executive committee to simply indicate that it would send the resolution as originally proposed to the county board, as sponsored by the 2 supervisors. It's not going to get a sponsorship by the executive committee.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll send the original to the county board. All right, moving on.
Do you need a motion to do that, or?
We don't need a motion, do we?
Need a motion? You want a motion on that?
For the minutes, it would be good to have a motion.
I would move to do that.
The original.
Correct.
And I will second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Against? Ayes have it. All right. All right, back to the number 9. Bring it up, move it. Kim passed out now.
All I did on that resolution
Is now exiting.
take out the last resolve clause, and I fixed the resolution summary. So, and handed that out, and the chairman has the blue jacket version.
resolution is coming from the executive committee. Right?
It's the one to terminate, change the emergency declaration.
I'll move to forward it to the county board for consideration at the March meeting.
Is there a second?
Mr. Chairman, sorry, it's Karen. Didn't you have a motion on this earlier?
Yeah, we just need a vote at this point.
Okay.
We just need to sign it,
Yeah, well, you need
No.
to vote on it
or vote on it. We need to vote on it.
and then sign it.
Is this fine with what's, everyone?
But wasn't it amended by taking that paragraph after the motion?
Took that out.
Yeah,
That was
but
part
the
of
motion was prior, wasn't it?
Was that part of the motion, Chris? Or can we include that as part of the motion? Maybe that's a better way to say it.
I guess that was my understanding, that's why I made a new motion. To forward it in this form to the county board for consideration.
I think we were right. We just need to sign it.
Okay.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, we haven't voted on it yet.
We vote on it.
Right.
But my comment is that I have no problem with moving it to the county board in this form. But I do expect that unless things would change, that I would vote against it on the county board floor.
I expect that there will be some amendments on the floor.
And I'm not speaking as much to the amendments as to the any changes in the public health orders and so forth, and the levels that the county is in.
We need to go to page 2.
I would just like to make a comment that we, Supervisor Gilbert has indicated, it's been on our radar for a long time. Okay? So eventually, in order to get it out of the executive committee, I would like to offer it to the entire county board for their input, discussion, criticism, whatever, okay? And take a formal action on the deal. I think we need to start moving it along. Things have come a long way in a year, and things have changed. Thank you.
I seconded that previous motion a long time, before, and that was with the intent that I had that it was going to the full board and just be dealt with, whatever happens to it.
All right, so all in favor of sending to the county board has been changed here, say aye.
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
Aye. Aye, 2. All right. Send it, see what happens. All right, number 11, the county board size committee recommendation. Is the resolution in your packet for that? process. A lot of things that happened since the last met here. Census Bureau now has told us it's going to be the end of September before we get our numbers. The Counties Association has had two websites or talks and is kind of trying to get is working to get the state legislators to change this, and because the timeline will not fit to be done by December 1st. So I think you had this to make this work, but the Counties Association and the state are talking, so right now the plan that we handed out, I think everybody got this in the packet, was to, the same districts would be for 2022 elections, and that's kind of the way it's set right now, as this is a game changer every day, so I guess that's about where we are. What else to do? So, all right. Update status of recording and broadcast of county board meetings.
This is Justin Reynolds, IT Director. We're very pleased with the county board upgrades. We're using it today. In terms of the status of the recording and live streaming, working through the procurement process with Kim's office and her help brought up some good questions. The first thing is, what is the official record? And also, what are the expectations for the public in terms of if the streaming would stop, does the meeting stop? So we wanted to clarify that and document that in terms of the rules, the county board rules. So they brought up a lot of good questions, and I'll let Kim, if you have questions, to address that.
So I would think that there will be a couple of possible rule changes to address video and video audio live streaming that will need to be presented. And also some internal policies that will need to be adapted, such as how the record will be stored. It will be the official record, so in the event that there is a record request, we can produce it. So the thought is to take some time and to develop those policies, as well as develop any proposed rule changes that would need to be brought before this committee. I guess long story short is we're not going to be live streaming, or the proposal is not to start live streaming at your March meeting. I know that in the past there may have been some reports that would happen, and that's likely not going to happen. So we'll continue to work on policies and potential rule changes and bring them to you.
Questions? Committee member reports from WCA.
Well, this morning we had a Zoom meeting about confirmed workshops and breakout sessions at the annual conference in September, assuming that it will be a live conference. There were about 100 different breakout suggestions that came. Some of the things that have made the cut and they're going to be working on it in agricultural and environmental land use. One was farm sustainability, using incinerators as a way to get rid of trash, switching from fossil fuels to renewable at the county level, county organ personnel, public broadcasting of county board meetings was the number one thing. Then they also had strategic planning at the county board level, redistricting, and recruiting diverse board members. Also in personnel, recruiting and retaining county employees, cost of health insurance, the vaccination guidelines and whether you can or cannot require a vaccination. Health and Human Services, mental health crisis services, the youth justice system, the changing face of county nursing homes are all ones that are being looked at to get speakers. The other judicial and public safety, they're looking to have breakouts about the alternative courts, the drug courts and so forth. The EMS issues around the state, and the crisis intervention training and crisis intervention partnering is also one that they're looking at with public-private. Taxation and finance, number one thing is created taxation sustainability in the future with alternative fundings and how that works with the debt levy, with utility taxes. The state keeping a bigger share of this utility tax than most of the counties feel is correct. Transportation funding, broadband, alternative fuel infrastructure and how to charge for alternative vehicles. And then just others, top ones are economic development and things. They roll several together behind the scenes, the financing feasibility and site selection to transform your community. And then they're would be partnering with the Baker State Sheriffs on their own and doing some things on that. So the overall, there will be, there's been some negotiation with Milwaukee and Dane counties since they did not pay their dues because they thought we were way too conservative. And so there's been some discussion with them, and I believe Milwaukee County is going to pay their dues, but they want to have some diversity and inclusion training breakouts at the legislative conference. So that's where we're at this point.
All right, then one other thing we need to talk about is that the exec committee may have to meet about these proposals. Kim?
Yes, proposals for the strategic planning are due the 10th of March. So as you go about setting your next meeting dates, which assuming your regular meeting will be in April, if you could please look at your calendars and perhaps for the week of the 10th is a Wednesday, so the executive committee agenda we would need to put together will need to be put out sometime later this week if you were planning on meeting later next week. So do you have dates in mind? Maybe March 11th, 12th, 16th, and then you'll want to have some time in there too to interview according to the timeline in the RFP. It indicated to the proposers that you would evaluate the proposals and conduct interviews between the 15th and the 24th. Because the April meeting for executive, your regular meeting, you'll likely want to have a resolution on that agenda for the award.
Okay, so working backwards, April 5th is the next exec meeting. March 29th is the meeting with village presidents and town chair and city mayors, the 29th at 1 o'clock. So then we gotta have this in between, after that, before that.
Before that, my suggestion would be to, again, I'll let you talk amongst yourselves, but if you could have a meeting of the executive committee on either the 11th or 12th to evaluate the proposals and select maybe your top 3, 4, or 5, and then conduct interviews the following week. Remember, this will be closed session for executive committee. So, whatever you decide, the 12th is a Friday, the 11th is a Thursday, and then perhaps schedule interviews the 23rd or 24th. I'm sorry, the 16th or 17th. County board is the 16th.
Comments?
I don't have a problem with any of the dates, but if we're gonna be in closed session anyway, I mean, would an evening work better? Instead of a day?
Make a.
Whatever you decide. I don't think there's any, other than the county board, I don't think there's any committee meetings. Like, for instance, building committee meets later in the day, but that's earlier in the month, so. Do you want to do the 11th at 5, 6, 7?
Can we do the 12th?
That's a Friday. You can do it at 5 if somebody brings a fish fry.
They have that rolling stone, pretty good dish.
Actually, it could be earlier than that on Friday. I can come earlier.
Friday at 4, 5?
Yeah, I mean, I would just prefer an evening, I guess, given it's closed session and that type of business anyhow. If you could accommodate that, I'd appreciate it.
All right, so then you.
That's all I'm saying. You guys pick it and I'll be good.
So maybe for the evaluation, we can settle on the 12th. In the evening or late afternoon. And then, I'm just looking at the calendar, the 17th or 18th for interviews. And I think for that, we would need to be flexible. We can put out an agenda on Friday the 12th for the interviews. So you can talk about it at that point, the time, but I think we need to have a little flexibility. From what I can tell right now, and I've not seen any of the proposals, but from what I can tell from the interest that I'm seeing, a couple of them are from out of state.
All right, so we'll go with the 12th, and then we can decide if we want to go with the next week.
What time on the 4th? On the 12th?
You pick it.
4 o'clock?
4?
Okay, later in the day.
Is that okay? 4 o'clock on the 12th?
Thank you.
All right, so the next one is March 12th to 4. All right, that, anything else? We're here.
What time on the 5th?
Oh, what time on the 5th? Mr. Bourne is going to be here. That's on the Monday, the regular executive.
Tentative, he could be here.
Yeah,
And
10.
we need to provide him what time.
5th of April?
Yes.
Yeah. What time could I?
Afternoons are better, but I'll just, whatever you gotta do, you gotta do.
I got a meeting at night, so it doesn't matter.